Welcome to the Two Worlds podcast, mate. How you going?
Thank you, mate. I'm good. Thank you for having me. I'm a bit looking forward to this. Hopefully this is good fun. Oh, it'll be good fun. Not hopefully. It'll be good fun.
Definitely be good fun. Definitely be good fun. How was your weekend?
It was good, mate. We've had stellar weather in Adelaide, haven't we? It hasn't felt like autumn at all. So, it was good. It was good. It was my youngest lad's 3rd birthday.
Ah, nice.
We officially have a three-nager.
Yeah.
And yeah, just training. Got out for a really good ride on Saturday morning. Attacked Monty. Hit some good watts. So yeah, I'm starting to feel fit again.
How far did you ride?
It was short-ish this week. It was only just shy of 80k.
Yep.
But we did some hard work. We did some hard work up Monty 4x8 minute reps at big watts. So I'm feeling fit again.
Yeah.
Starting to anyway.
How long does 80k take you to ride?
Look, depends. In a race, you'd hope it's only around 2 hours or just over a little bit. But again, depends where you go, stop lights, traffic lights, all the rest of it. When I'm riding around suburban or metropolitan Adelaide, like doing beachy runs and all the rest of it, I'll average 32, 33k an hour for a 4-hour ride, 5-hour ride. That includes like stop lights and all the rest. So moving pace, probably around 35, 36k an hour.
Yep. Do you do much nutrition, eating and that when you're out?
Yeah, heaps. Like
a lot of gels and.
Oh, look, not so much gels when I'm doing training rides. So like I'll generally take a bottle with carbs and electrolytes and all those sorts of things, and it's
liquid carbs.
Liquid carbs that works for me because I'm a big sweater. So getting in the fluid is really important for me as well. But it's important for me to practice what you want to use in a race, but at the same time, I'm also trying to drop a little bit of weight and lose some skin folds at the moment. So I'm not going overboard on the ride nutrition or the training nutrition. That's a subtle adjustment I've made recently with my coach and done a little bit of fasted training as well, just picking the right time to play with the nutrition in training.
Yep. Yeah, the biggest one of the things I don't do well is training how I race. I generally, I ran 20 on the weekend. Took me about an hour and 40 minutes, just zone 2 work, so roughly just over 5-minute Ks. And I've only just started to get my zone 2 Ks back down again. I haven't been feeling well the last few weeks, so it's funny, you're not feeling well, and my zone 2 running was blowing out to 5-minute 25 Ks.
Yeah.
Now I'm feeling better. I think I had a bit of a sinus issue, so I'm starting to come back down.
Patience, though, is it? You say that you don't want to do. You can go 2 ways with that. You want to be able to replicate the demand of the race in training and in small amounts, but at the same time, you don't want to race in training.
Yeah,
you've got to think about what's
you just burn yourself out.
Yeah, but the training session's got to be around the purpose and the response and the physiological adaptation that you're looking to get from that particular session at that particular moment, and you can leave it in training. You can leave your race in training.
Yeah,
the problem. So it's being careful with that, isn't it?
Yeah, well, yeah. The problem is that I have with my training is that I don't eat gels or anything when I run. So I'll run sometimes for 2 hours and no water, and no food or no gels. And then when it gets to race day, my body's taking in water and my body's taking in gels, and it's just going. The stomachs are getting a bit upset. So I just got to learn to run with some water, drink water consistently, and then also get some gels into me when I'm running over, 15 Ks or something like that. So
I think I found that, if you think about, go back to that, what am I trying to get out of this particular session? What's the adaptation that I'm trying to gain by doing this particular intensity or particular time or distance? And if you're looking to do anything with moderate to high intensity over an extended period, you're not going to reach the same speed or demand as you would if you were carving up and having that sugar run through your system. So if you want to reach a high speed or you want to tap that high part of your threshold or your capability to elicit a response at that demand, you've got to fuel yourself to be able to do it. So in some ways, you're leaving some gains on the table by not fueling your training appropriately. But again, not every session needs to be about that. It's a nuanced and it depends answer depending on what you're trying to get out of it.
Yeah, I like to take the analogy of or the saying, and it was a military one, is train hard, fight easy.
Yeah.
So and it's a replica in the book that we're going to talk about as well. Is train the way they want to play.
That's it. Nothing new on race day, hey?
Yeah, that's it. So, well, look, man, the reason I got you in was because a while back when I was talking to my brother about him being the coach of a footy team, you were the first person that he contacted in regards to culture, bringing a team together, character, and how to build that sense of team achievement and teamwork within a group, especially, and a group of men, especially with men, and this can also be replicated to outside footy clubs, and it can even be replicated to your normal day life. So then I got in contact with you when you recommended me reading a book before we do it, and I read the book called James Kerr Legacy. It was about the All Blacks, and if you think about a book when you're talking about the All Blacks, you're thinking games, how they play, tactics, everything on the field. But this book talks about 10% of the field, 90% off the field. And it really dives into who they are as a person and getting down to leaving the jersey in a better place and what it means to be an All Black, which I found incredibly interesting because it also, throughout the book, they were quite heavily military orientated as well. So there was a lot of stuff in there that I was taught in the military. Excuse me. That sort of rewound in my mind when I was reading, and I go, wow, that's, and the New Zealand All Blacks adopted a lot of that mentality. Train hard, fight easy, for example. And then also, passing the buck, leaders make leaders. So I wanted to get you in to talk about this because, talking to my brother, you helped him out in an extremely massive way in regards to setting him up for success, just with building that culture and stuff like that. So do you want to give the audience at home a bit of a wrap of, who you are and what you've done sort of thing?
Yeah, definitely. Who am I? That's a deep philosophical question, isn't it? No. Yeah. So who am I? Is it worth setting up how we know each other or how that came to be? Yeah.
So when I started playing footy at a footy club, you were the captain there. And that footy club and that year has easily been the most enjoyable year for me. We didn't get the premiership that year.
We got close.
Yeah, we got close. I got a 10-game suspension, so I didn't end up playing finals. But it was enjoyable as in it was team field, team orientated, and the character of that team could never be questioned. And it was led by the leaders. It wasn't necessarily we had a great coach, but I think it was more player driven from the top down, and it was having accountability for everyone. So that's how we know each other. Just want to give a bit of a broader understanding of, what you do for work and that sort of thing.
So my background is I'm an exercise physiologist, which sort of speaks to maybe the rabbit hole we go down off the top of the chat about training and those sorts of things. But I've been an exercise physiologist and graduated from exercise and sports science and clinical exercise physiology 2010-ish, about that sort of time. But I don't feel like I've been an exercise physiologist for a while. I've done a lot of work in workplace and occupational health and wellbeing all over the place. So working with big organisations to unpack this problem of what is health and wellbeing for us. I've been...
Is that both across like physically and mentally?
Yeah, the whole gamut of it. Mm-hmm. The whole gamut of it. So I suppose I come to it through the lens of exercise physiology and exercise and sports science as my subject matter expertise. But then within that, it's the appreciation of what makes people tick, what makes organisations well, what makes teams well, all those sorts of things. So inevitably you start to go down the rabbit hole of, well, what's the culture? What's the leadership? Because that has a massive impact on the health of an organisation, the health of a team and all of the rest of it. So been all over with that, working with big multinational companies in government and organisations. I spent the better part of 3 or 4 years flying in and out of Papua New Guinea, running a huge on-site health program at a gold mine. So that's me professionally. But I suppose off the back of that, I've always loved sport, been involved with sport, always found myself gravitating towards, well, I suppose, in professional life and personal life, leadership roles, whether it be the captain of a footy team or being a leader or sort of pseudo leader at school growing up, but then in team leadership or management or semi-executive or director roles in my professional life. And I think that stems from my genuine interest in leadership as a subject, but then high performance as a subject and what goes into high performing teams and high performance outcomes, high performance results. So
is that where has led you to the legacy book?
Yeah, definitely. So I was really, really fortunate going back a few jobs, about a decade ago, to be given the opportunity to go on a high performance leadership program. The organisation I was working for at the time identified me as an emerging leader and spent a fair bit of cash to go on this experience and this journey. It was actually with a group called Leading Teams, who, if people sort of follow AFL, they've been in and around the traps, and they did a lot of really, really good work in the late 90s, early 2000s with some really successful teams. So I think I believe it was the Sydney Swans and the Bloods culture came off the back of an experience with Leading Teams. I might be wrong, but that's how I recall it. And I know they did a little bit of work with Hawthorn when they were really successful as well. So that's how they got their notoriety. And I was fortunate enough to go through their leadership development program for young executives and all the rest. So off the back of that experience, I got exposed to some really great mentors, some really great teachers, but then some peers going through that journey of roughly the same age or roughly the same degree of professional experience, very widely different fields, lawyers, accountants, and there I am as an allied health professional.
Yeah.
So that was really cool. But then through that got exposed to a lot of great material, of which this book was one thing. And it really, really resonated with me because I think some of the concepts that we were discussing in that executive high performance leadership program, you could draw stuff out of this book about how to build teams, how to build cultures, what went into agreed behaviour frameworks. And it was a living example of how it had been done. So we used things like that or other texts as reference points as we went through that, and then you take it and run with it. You come back to the organisation I was working with and you're trying to implement ideas and programs and concepts. And then meanwhile, in my personal life, having a kick of footy on the weekend, it was, well, where's the place for this here? So it was always about, I suppose, the introduction of some of those concepts and trying to build a high-performance team and a high-performance culture at local Saturday footy was, well, if I'm never going to run around on the MCG or under the bright lights, I'm never going to be an AFL player. How do I go through a career of local footy with a bunch of mates and get the absolute most out of ourselves and be able to look back at a time and go, that was great. That was really, really special because we put ourselves into it and we built something.
Yeah, leaving it in a better place.
Yeah, certainly. And look, by no means was I an incredible footballer. But I felt like I was a good leader and I felt like I had a responsibility and an obligation to leave the place in a better place than which I found it. And I felt that the contributions that I was able to make were always bigger in that sphere than what I was able to ever deliver on the park. But I think you throw back to the year and reference that you're talking about, and I think about it in the same way. We might have not had the ultimate success that year, and even comparing that particular season to years I did win senior premierships, that one stands out as really, really special because I think we as a group committed to that culture journey, and we grew and we experienced so much together that year, and we got that close.
Talking about that year, one of the most eye-opening moments for me was after the first game when you tapped me on the shoulder and said it's time for you to sweep the sheds. Now, I didn't really know what that meant at the time.
Did we win that day? Was I pissed off?
I can't remember. Cannot remember.
Doesn't matter, does
it? Doesn't. It doesn't. But yeah, and anyway, going back to the story, you tapped me on the shoulder and said, hey, mate, it's time for you to sweep the sheds. And I actually didn't know what that meant. And I went, maybe it means buy everyone a beer or something like that. And then you handed me the broom and said, time to clean up. And I think it was me and a couple others. And I cleaned up at the time and I thought to myself, what did I do that for? And it actually didn't really resonate with me until a couple of weeks ago when I actually read this book. And I'm going to read a quote out from it. While the country is still watching replays and school kids lie in bed dreaming of All Blacks glory, the All Blacks themselves are tidying up after themselves. They're sweeping the sheds, doing it properly so no one else has to. Because no one looks after the All Blacks look after themselves. Now, I didn't actually know what that really meant until I read the entire book. And to me, what it means is that no one cleans up after us because we have the self-respect for us and the club and everyone else around us that no one has to clean our shit. We clean our own shit. No one takes care of us, which really speaks to the character of the person and the team and the organisation. It means that the water boy has just as much say in regards to character as the team captain or the coach or the club president, which is an absolutely fantastic driving force to have when everyone else feels as equal. You may be playing on the ground at the time and you may be kicking the goals or you may be calling the shots in the office, but on a personal level, you're all just human beings.
Yep.
And that was, as I was reading that book, I went, shit, now this actually means something.
Yeah.
So what's your thoughts on trying to implement a strategy like this in a sporting club, but then also in a work environment?
Yeah, I think small things like that add up. And it's really, really important if you want to achieve anything together, you've got to have a group on the same page. And it's about coming to a collective understanding of what are our agreed behaviours. What do we want to stand for? What are we going to put a stake in the ground over?
So goal setting.
Yes, goal setting, but not goal setting that's the objective outcome that we want to get. It's how do we want to carry ourselves? How do we want to be seen to be doing our business?
The standards we accept.
The standards we accept, what's above the line and what's below the line. What do we collectively agree to be true? How do we see the world? How are we going to shape our own world? So the very literal example of sweep the sheds is, we want to go out, we want to play well, but then we want to come back and have respect for the place that we are, whether it be our own home ground or somewhere else, and clean it up, return it to the place in which you found it. Show the respect that you're potentially a visitor at someone else's oval or someone else's ground. You're sharing the experience of playing the game together, and you've got a responsibility and obligation to keep it neat, keep it tidy. And that's about strength of character, discipline, generally just having respect for the place and the environment and all of the rest of it. So okay, well, that's something we want to be about. That's how we want people to perceive us. But it's also, and this is mentioned in the book, it's not being too big to do the small things. And I think the powerful part of that story, when told through the legacy book, is it was often the captain, it was Richie McCaw himself, that would go and do that. So if there was strapping tape on the ground or Powerade bottles, he wasn't above doing the hard work. He wasn't above doing the small things. So by leading through example and going, well, no, I may be the captain of the All Blacks, or I may be the CEO of my organisation, or I may be the leader of that particular team, but nothing is above me, and I'm not beyond picking up that piece of rubbish. So in some way it's humbling as well, and it's about keeping you grounded, but ultimately it's about reflecting and demonstrating a behaviour in which you as a group agree is an important one to carry forward. It's above the line.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting, isn't it, in such a day and age where everyone wants to be the star, everyone wants to be the best player. The NBA is massive on it. They're just huge stars and everyone does everything for them. But then you go back to a team that has over 120-year period had a win record of 76.77, the highest win record of any professional sports team ever.
Yep.
And then you look at their characteristics, the way they're driven, and their leadership mentality and roles are just so far from what is practiced today. You then realise to yourself, well, that's the reason that they have such a high win percentage.
Certainly. And I think this goes back to that leadership model that I was taught through that program, and you can sort of break down what goes into creating high performance. And you've got mechanical and dynamic elements. The mechanical bits might be the systems, the policies, the processes, the KPIs. the how do we actually do the work? What's our strategy and all of those sorts of things? And we can spend a lot of time on the dynamics, the tactics. Where are we going to put that player? Who's going to man up on that particular guy? Whereas the dynamics, it's what are our behaviours? What are our beliefs? What are our attitudes? What do we believe to be true? How are we going to carry ourselves? What's the culture? Dynamics drive mechanics.
Yes.
It's the grease that moves the gears. So I think you can fall into the trap of looking for mechanical solutions to dynamic problems, whereas a lot of high-performance teams get their mechanics right and their mechanics set, but then from there it's how do we build the dynamics? How do we build the environment that breeds success and breeds competition or breeds people growing and developing and maturing, not just as athletes or professionals, but as well-rounded people.
Yeah, and you talk about growing both professionally and then off the field as well. There's a great part in the book there where whenever you get your peak, you have to change your game. Did you want to can you elaborate on that a bit?
I think in the world of high performance, business or whatever, standing still is as good as going backwards. So as soon as you feel like you're on top of your game, you need to think about changing up and need to think about what the next thing is.
To get better.
Yep. Because observers on the outside, if you're anywhere near the peak, you're going, well, what are they doing? What are they doing that I'm not? And how do I bring that into what I'm doing to bring myself to that level? So it doesn't need to be a drastic adjustment. It might be a subtle change, but again, lots of small, subtle changes or small, subtle improvements can add up to be significant change at the very, very pointy end. So it's are we as professional as what we could be? Am I doing everything that I can with a sleep recovery, diet, fatigue management perspective if we're talking about elite athletes? What am I leaving on the table? So it's not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, but where can I look for more opportunity and how can I change my game if I feel like I'm on top of it? What's the next step?
And I think one of their really, really good points in their book was when they were on top of their game, they were heavy drinkers as well, which I thought I found pretty surprising in a high-performance sport team. But that was one of those things when you're on top of your game, you need to change your game. And that was one of their moments where they stood back and they went, well, we're not actually respecting ourselves here or the country that we lead by getting pissed after every game. So they were on top of their game, changed their game and changed their culture, and they started winning more.
But there's also the analysis of, okay, well, what are the behaviours or what are the things that we're doing that are currently not conducive to where we want to be? So by going out and having a big night, what am I leaving on the table in terms of recovery for the next day and my preparation? Am I setting myself back 2 to 3 nights of good quality sleep? And then how is that affecting me down the line? So it's all of those little things adding up. But then again, culturally, is that what they want to stand for? Is that how they want to socialise? Is that how they want to bond? Is it the most effective way to do that? Or what other negative habits or traits are they building or ingraining into the fabric of their group cohesive being? That was a bad way of explaining it, but how does that particular behaviour become conducive to where they want to be or not?
And it's also about their perception, isn't it, of, them sitting back and people seeing who they really are from a standpoint of, these guys are professional athletes.
Yeah.
They're also heavy drinkers on that end.
But it also comes from a sense of responsibility and obligation. If you're going to put a jersey on, or you're going to represent your club or your team, you've got a responsibility and an obligation to everyone who looks up to you. Do you want to break the heart of that little kid by having a scandalous story come out of a big night on the Terps? Again, it goes into the legacy you want to leave, the respect you have for the jersey, the respect you have for the place. So these are just all concepts and questions that you can ask yourself when you're thinking about the team dynamic that you want to build, and the journey that you want to take with a particular group. It's like, well, okay, what do we want to be? What do we want to be? What do we want to be about? And how are those attitudes, behaviours and beliefs manifested into action?
Yeah, it's so important, isn't it? Because you have so many goal setting theories and so many goal setting workshops these days, and footy meetings and stuff like that. And there's always an end goal and how we're going to get there, the physical stuff, the mechanical side of things.
Yeah.
But very, very rarely do you have in sporting, local footy, sporting, and then workplaces, who do we want to be?
Yep.
Which you read this book and you think to yourself, it is so much more important to find out who we want to be as a person and a team. And if we get that right, then the mechanics of it will take care of itself.
Exactly right. Because you get a whole bunch of people that are on the same page, on the same vision, on the same journey, believing in the same thing. And when you're in that environment and you feel respected and you feel trusted and you feel safe and you're having fun, you'll go the extra mile. You'll do that extra thing because you're not doing it for yourself. You're doing it for the collective, or you're doing it for your mate. All of that builds incredible momentum. I suspect that more local sporting organisations or clubs are doing this now, but I think back however long it was ago, people struggled with where to get started. What was the model, how to frame it up. So there's incredible resources out there these days. And look to books like this and even some of those consulting organisations that I had the opportunity to do that program through, reaching out to local sporting clubs and offering modules and all of those sorts of things. But I think taking the time to pause and plan and think about this stuff at the start of the season, regularly reviewing it, because at the end of each season, players come, players go, coaches change. You're probably at a different point within your developmental and your growth journey. And you go, well, okay, that thing that we said was true once, is it still true for us now? Or is that something we're looking to pivot on? Or is that something we want to raise the bar on? So reflecting on this stuff is really, really important, in the same way that you take time to have moments of reflection in your own life about where you're at, what I want to be, where I want to go, all those sorts of things. So even like you made a brief reference to it before, the application of this is just not sporting, it's work, but also personal. So what are your own agreed values and behaviours? What are you going to stand for as a person? And then how do you then start to role model that, or be a leader in your own immediate family or immediate circle?
Yeah. It's the book's great because you can reflect it upon sporting, work life, and then your personal life as well, can't you?
Yeah, certainly. And it can be really confronting. It can be really confronting to deep dive into why you do what you do, why you believe what you believe, and what are your attitudes towards certain things. But if you want to make a change with anything, you've got to start with that.
Yeah. I made a change after reading this book, and in the blue head, or keeping a blue head, and then also the red heads as well. So your blue heads are your relaxed, calm, can make good decisions under pressure, and almost feeds off that pressure. Your red heads are your guys that are failing under pressure, they're making bad decisions, and they can't handle it. I heard a quote the other day when I was just scrolling through the algorithms on Instagram is losing your temper is a weakness. And I sometimes I can sly off the radar and lose my temper a bit. And I keep reminding myself mentally, keep a blue head. Just keep a blue head.
Yeah.
Take a breath, keep a blue head, think through it.
It's almost succumbing to the fight or flight response, isn't it? You're placed in a situation that you don't know how to control, or there's extra demand, and your natural instinct of adrenaline and heart rate and anxiety starts to kick over. So through that cloud or through that fog, can you make good decisions? So in some ways it's about being objective and being able to ground yourself in that moment. It's being able to stop and pause and go, okay, where am I now? What is this thing that is happening? How am I choosing to view it? How am I choosing to reflect on it? Is this thing as bad as what I think it's going to be? So in some ways what we're talking about here is the practice of mindfulness, isn't it? To be grounded in the moment, to remove yourself objectively, to not pass judgment, to keep a blue head, to navigate through the storm, to navigate the ambiguity and be cool with your decision making. And it, like anything, takes rehearsal and it takes practice, because first of all, you've got to catch yourself in that moment and go, okay, I'm on the edge here.
It has to be self-reflection, doesn't it?
Self-reflection, and pause. So that practice of mindfulness is no surprises as to why that's taken off massively in the mental health and the mental well-being space.
Yeah, I've seen it. My brother does it with his footy team as well. So whenever someone on the field has lost the plot, is losing it, arguing with umpires, they're immediately designated as a redhead, and then pretty much the runner's out to them and dragging them off straight away. 5 minutes on the bench, get your blue head back on, your good decision making back on, your cool under pressure back on, and then you can go back on the field.
Certainly.
I've seen it work in a grand final last year. There was a guy that was losing it. He wasn't playing well. They got him off, 10 minutes off at the end of the second. Came back on, played really well in the second half, but they identified him early.
And I think the beauty in it is giving it a label. That concept of blue head or red head allows you to anchor yourself back to the concept. It's because when you're in the moment and when you're stressed, you may be not thinking clearly, and it might be a mate tapping in the shoulder, hey, you're in red head right now. I need you to center. I need you to focus. Let's get your blue head back on. And it's almost like, okay, I can catch myself because I've got that as an anchor and that as a reference point. I know what that means. So to use it as a tactic, as a coach, to be able to say, hey, we're not on where we need to be right now. I need you to come back to me, take a moment, take a breath, center yourself.
Yeah, and even on a personal level for me, I'm very practical. I like to work things out myself. I like to do it myself. If there's a new diet, I like to try it myself. I don't really like to read the studies. I like to try it, see how I'm feeling. If there's a new training method or running in zone 2 or something like that, I like to try it myself. I'm not a real big reader on data and stuff like that. I'm a practitioner. I'm going to try this myself. So what I've done from this book is tried it myself, and every single time, if I have a bit of a temper spur, it is take a breath, remind myself that I need to be a blue head, because blue heads make good decisions under pressure.
Yeah.
And I've found that a bit of a game changer in the past fortnight.
Yeah.
Loved it. I've absolutely loved it.
So what you're doing there is almost you're building your model for your own agreed behaviours. So in this moment, a below-the-line behaviour, a below-the-line standard would fly off the handle. We don't do that. It's not what we stand. It's not what we stand for. It's not what we're on about. What does better look like in that moment? And you've given yourself some options, or you've given yourself a framework or a reference to go, okay, when we find ourselves here, this is our default response. By building that agreed behaviour framework or that agreed response model within a team, you become predictable. You become predictable to the people around you, and you know what's next. So you can move through mess, move through ambiguity, and come back to where you need to be, or hold people to a line of accountability for where you want to go.
Yeah. And on the flip side of that, if you're a redhead, you become predictable to the opposition.
Yep. I used to love stirring those people up.
Yeah, they were easy, weren't they? I'm just going to read a bit of a paragraph out here about keeping a blue head. It's the first page with when you switch to the chapter in the book. From listening comes knowledge. From knowledge comes understanding. From understanding comes wisdom. From wisdom comes well-being. And we're just talking, like it took me to listen to this book, to gain the knowledge, to put the understanding into it, to get the wisdom out of it, to get the well-being out of it. And it was a step-by-step process. And I've probably, I've probably lost my temper so many times that it's hard to count. But by doing small things like this, it's been, like I said, and it's only been a fortnight, and it's not like I lose my temper all the time. I'm not like one of those people. It might be, once a fortnight or something, I might get angry here or there if something goes wrong. But right now it's working.
Yeah, and I suppose that what goes with that is that continued deliberate practice of mindfulness and not passing judgment. I think often we will place labels on things, labels on behaviours, or call it good, call it bad, and we can get down on ourselves. Or the opposite, we can get ahead of ourselves and pump ourselves up a little bit. So I think if a thing happens, pause on it, reflect on it, and say, this thing is happening right now, but it's just a thing. Attaching a label of good or bad or happy or sad or all the rest of it as a label that we place on it. So that can help in those situations as well. But that concept, I probably explained it very superficially and quite poorly, is sort of rooted in the concepts or some of the teaching of philosophical stoicism. So I think a lot of the leadership, team building, cultural stuff that I've taken the journey on seems to be drawn back to that a fair bit as well. So it was reading Legacy and thinking about the teachings from that particular book, but it was then a pretty quick jump to things like Meditations by Marcus Aurelius and the writings of Brian Holiday and The Obstacle is the Way and Ego is the Enemy. So there's a good little circle of connected texts there if you want to take the next step in the reading journey after that one, mate.
I definitely will. What's your one bit of advice for someone that is on a leadership role? Could be at work, could be in a football side or any sporting side. What's your one bit of advice to build a strong culture in a team?
To build a strong culture in a team. It's hard. One bit of advice. Where do you start? Look, if you're going to start anywhere, I think you need to start with yourself and understand yourself.
Yeah, great answer.
Because if you don't understand yourself, how are you then meant to go forth and lead others? So become introspective and look to constantly examine yourself. Mm-hmm. You are your own masterpiece and your own work in progress. And by understanding yourself and understanding how you respond and how you react to the world around you, I think you gain greater perspective for how to guide, nudge, and lead others. So by understanding your own tendencies and patterns, you can then start to see that in other people and provide guidance and all those sorts of things. So I suppose that's where I feel like I started with my leadership journey. It was an examination of myself and getting to understand and know myself. And then from there, go forth and try to lead others. So in some way, favourite quote of mine by Jordan Peterson. I know some people don't like him, but I love the idea of...
I'm a big fan. Yeah, I'm a big fan of him.
He's a bit controversial these days, but I think some of his very early teachings... One thing he said before you go think about changing the world, clean your room. Sort your own world out first. So before going to change a team or lift other people up or all of the rest of it, seek first to understand yourself. Start there. Because one of my favourite lessons out of the book that we're talking about was the concept that good leaders create more leaders. So then how are you, firstly, through understanding yourself, going forth to then not just see the best out of someone, but create another leader, create your replacement, make yourself redundant.
So when you move on, it's going to be a better place.
Yeah. Leave it in a better place. Mm-hmm. There's so many good quotes that come out of this particular book, but that concept of wise men plant seeds, knowing fully well they will never sit under the shade of their trees. Do something now that you know someone else will reap the benefit of in 10 years, 15 years, and all of the rest of it. So I think back on that. Come back to again how we know each other and the opportunity that we had to play local footy together. That season was the pinnacle of that club's on-field performance. We had never been at that level or that grade of footy before, and we got us there. Without giving it away, you sort of fast forward now. That club is so much further on the journey, and we're now in the place that we thought we wanted to be when we sat down and started going through the dreams, the plans, the visions of what do we want to be, where do we want to go, and you blue sky think and put writing on butcher's paper and just dare to dream, that club's at that point now. And that's 5 or 6 years after the season or the journey that we're talking about. So I'd like to think that even though we're not running around anymore, we had a small part to play in what's being reflected at that place now.
Yeah, I've got a really good paragraph from the book here that would really reflect what you're talking about. The word character comes from the ancient Greek character, meaning the mark that is left on a coin during its manufacture. Character is also the mark left on life by you, and the mark we leave on life. It's the impact you make when you're here and the trace you leave once you're gone. Character rises out of values, our purposes, the standards we set ourselves, our sacrifice and commitment, and the decisions we make under pressure, but is primarily defined by the contribution we make, the responsibilities we take, the leadership we show.
Oh, certainly. It's strong, isn't it? And I think if you talk about leaving a legacy, is there any greater legacy in life than having kids? And now that I've got a couple of young boys of my own, God, do they hold the mirror up back at you more than anything? And you think about, wow, what are the behaviours? What are the beliefs? What are the things that I want to be true? How am I carrying myself? Because if there's bits that you're not quite sure about, or bits that you don't like, or there's behaviours that are below the line and you're doing it around them, they will show it to you right back. So in some respects, you'll go, whoa, I didn't know I was like that, but I now see that thing that I do in them. I've got to be better.
Yeah.
So that as a principle, I think as a lesson's a really important one to learn. But again, it's just the extension of all of the same concepts into different spheres of life. And I think by understanding this stuff and continuing to be introspective with yourself, as I say, everyone's their own work in progress, aren't they?
That's the greatest thing about the book is you can it can be related to so much more than just sport.
Yeah.
And we were just talking just then about how I've related it to my life and made changes.
But also the like I am a bang average normal person. I do not profess to be a guru in any of this sort of stuff, but the lessons are there to be learned and taken and evolved if people want to. And I think here we can sit here and talk about the application of these concepts in an environment like the All Blacks, but there's nothing to stop people from going, hey, I get this, I understand it, I want to take it and apply it to my world. It's incredibly relevant for everywhere we go.
Because the biggest thing is that it doesn't cost anything. People might think that the All Blacks have a whole bunch of capital they can spend on their team every single year, but it's got nothing to do with money. It's got nothing to do with anything like that. It's got to do about looking into the person and getting the best out of them.
And that go back to that concept of mechanics and dynamics and where you want to spend your time and where you want to invest your energy. And I'm going through this journey with a few things in professional life at the moment, and I sit back and I get incredibly frustrated, and maybe it now comes back to me to reflect on that and go, okay, how am I interacting with this situation, or how am I presenting and educating those around me? But I get incredibly frustrated with people continuing to look for mechanical fixes to dynamic problems. And the answer is not there. The answer is not in another guideline or playbook or policy or system. It's getting people to reflect and providing the skills and growing them as individuals, or enhancing the environment and the culture in which we operate, thinking about our framework for communication. What's our agreed collective purpose? We've got to get that right.
Yeah.
We've got to get that right, because without that stuff, the other bits are a stack of cards.
Have you had any point where you've had to reflect on a personal event, maybe sporting, maybe life, where you've had to come back, self-reflect, work out where you've went wrong, and then have another crack at it?
Yeah, I'm going through it right now. So life after footy for me, I threw myself into the world of triathlons. I've always just loved the idea of triathlons. I sort of grew up in a family or an environment that was very sporty, and Dad was a surf lifesaver, and he was a good swimmer, and he was always riding his bike. So he never did team sports, and he did a few triathlons, and I just love the idea of it. I love the idea of it, and I always told myself that, okay, when body gives up or I can't play footy anymore for whatever reason, that's what I want to do. And I want to do an Ironman. I want to do an Ironman, and I want to go sub 10 hours. That's always been the goal. So I've thrown myself into the sport, spent a copious amount of money on the bikes, the toys, the running shoes, and don't dare ask me to sum up how much that's cost me over the last couple of years. But look, I love it and I enjoy it for a couple of different reasons, which maybe we'll get into in a bit. But I had my first crack at an Ironman last year, and I say first crack.
How did that go?
Horribly. It was an absolutely unmitigated disaster. But I'm not embarrassed to talk about it because it's an important part of the growth and journey process for me.
So what happened on the race?
What happened? So I went into it very confident and well prepared that I was going to get my goal of sub 10. Yeah. So
where was the race?
I was up in Cairns. That was
humidity.
Humidity, yeah, certainly, which was dangerous for me for a heavy and salty sweater. And inevitably that was the reason for my downfall. But yeah, look, I went into there very, very confident that I'd done the work to get the result and the outcome that I wanted.
Did you have much acclimatization?
Yes and no. It's funny, we talked off the top about this being a very mild autumn in Adelaide, and I've been able to do so much outside riding over the last month. I think back to 12 months ago, a lot of the key sessions that I did in the lead in the last month, it was pissing with rain, and I did on the trainer. So I was a little bit nervous about that, but look, generally I tried my best. I did a lot of indoor long pool swims with the wetsuit on to get the body temperature up, and then sat in the sauna straight afterwards. I did a lot of rides with the garbage bags on and the sweat, but it's not the same as being up there.
Yeah, it isn't. I spent about 18 months up in Townsville.
Yep.
So 4 hours south of Cairns.
Yep.
And the first time I went up there, we went for a run, and it was like I was swallowing a bucket of water.
Yeah.
It's incredible, especially if you live in the southern states,
yeah, definitely,
and you haven't really experienced that before,
sure.
And then you try and go race up there or run up there. Like we spent most of our time when I was up in Townsville over in Afghanistan, but the 6 months that we did have there out of the 12 months I was stationed there was just brutal, and it took me the whole 6 months to acclimatise, and even then, I still feel like I wasn't a local.
Oh, it's hard. As I said, like, exercising and being around heat and humidity. So I spent the better part of 3 years going in Papua New Guinea. So humidity I was used to. And I felt like I followed the protocols that I should have to prepare myself as best as possible. But again, I'm not a professional athlete as much as I'd love to be. I'm not good enough. So look, went into the race as prepared and I can, and I had a mechanical on the bike.
What do you mean by mechanical?
I lost my bottles. I lost my rear bottles. So again, I worked with a sports dietitian in the lead up to the race because I knew that I was a very heavy, salty sweater. I knew what my carbohydrate intake was going to be, and I had bottles dialed very specifically, X carbs per litre, X number of mils per hour in terms of fluid replacement, and then sodium balanced as well. But that completely goes out the window when you lose 2 bottles off the back of your bike, and there's a litre and a half of my very, very dialed nutrition plan. So I was like, okay, this is Ironman. Things are going to happen. Things are going to go wrong. And I made the deliberate decision at that moment in the race to laugh and smile, because what else was I going to do?
Yeah.
So I went back past. I slowed down on the bike to try and look for them. I couldn't find them. It's like, all right, well, on course Gatorade it is, I guess. And I felt like I was taking on enough. In some ways I tried to overcompensate because it was a weak solution. There was probably just nowhere near enough salt in it for me, because I know I go at like 1,200 to 1,300 milligrams of sodium per litre. So I was nervous about it. I had some backup salt tablets in my special needs bag, which I grabbed and took. But again, across the space of a 5-hour bike ride, I was just sodium depleting.
Yeah, whenever I run ultra marathons, I'm having salt tablets every half an hour.
Yeah.
And I'm having 4 or 5 of them.
Yep. So it was not that I wasn't aware of how to handle it. I had a plan, went and prepared, but something happened on the day and the way that I adjusted or the way that I tried to compensate just didn't work. So I got...
Quoting Mike Tyson, everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face.
Yeah. So I got about 110K into the bike and was still on track for about a 5-hour ride time, which was my goal. And then I got a bit twitchy and crampy.
The effects of dehydration?
Yeah, pretty well. And it then went south really, really quickly. Like I cramped very, very, very badly for 2 hours to the point where there were moments there where I was like audibly screaming in pain. I remember trying to climb out of the saddle off the backside of Rex Lookout for anyone in those cans on the second lap of the bike course, and just both quads and groins and hip flexor muscles just locking up and almost fell off. And yeah, then to make matters worse, I dropped my chain and I was a shell of a human being by the time I got to transition 2. Still rode 5 hours 24-ish, so like not an embarrassing ride time, and still within striking distance of sub 10 because I'd swam well. Pulled myself together and just ran. The run's always been the strong part, and I trained and I knew I was off the bike, aiming for a 3:10, 3:15 marathon, and set out at that pace, and with every step, everything cramped and everything hurt. But I was like, okay, well, I've been doing this for 2 hours. Just keep going. And I actually started to feel pretty comfortable, like despite the pain and the cramping, like felt comfortable aerobically at my goal pace, which was around 4:30 per kilometre. Then I got to about 8 or 9 Ks and thought, okay, there's still a long way. Dial it back. And I remember having the conscious thought at the time, look, you're probably not going to go sub 10 today. Dial it back. Start to dial it back now and just accept the fate. And then...
And let's just think about finishing this thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And don't let the ego get ahead of yourself, because for a little period there I was running and chatting with some people, and my GPS was out, and I was actually running with the guys who were a lap ahead of me at the time, and they were on track to go sub 9. And I was chatting away perfectly with them despite the cramping. And they were like, mate, you're flying, you'll be fine. But it got to 10 Ks. So after the first lap, saw the family, gives you a bit of a boost. And then a bit further up the road, it was like I'd had a micro sleep. And I just came to very quickly and, whoa, where have I been for the last 5 or 10 minutes?
They're crazy things to have micro sleeps. I've had it a couple of times, experienced a couple of times in the military, when we would be a day or two without sleep, and you can literally practically just shut off and not know what's happening, and then all of a sudden you go, what just happened? Where am I? And who's around me?
Exactly.
It's an amazing thing to experience.
I was walk running by that point. Like I was by this point that far into like probably dangerous hyponatremia. But it was that moment, and I go, okay, I need to consciously walk run. And this is going to be my afternoon now. I got to 13, 14 Ks, so just shy of the aid station, and I think like a 6 minute, 7 minute K. So I was walking at that point. And then I got cold. So out of nowhere, I just got this big dump of chills, and I'm like, oh shit. So for me, that was the line between tough and stupid. And then not long after that, I sort of got to a spot with some volunteers where asked for medical, sort of took a knee and fell under the book, and a bush and the space blanket was on not long after. Yeah,
especially in that type of environment, or for anywhere, if you start to get seriously cold and you stop sweating, that's when it's time to pull the pin, unless your body hasn't already pulled the pin on you and you're blacked out. Because I've seen that a few times in the military. You know, we'll be doing big stomps and walking, and blokes will stop sweating, and all of a sudden they're down and they're airlifted out.
So I was then eventually back into the tents in medical there for a couple of hours. Put some IV bags and that through me, and my blood pressure was all over the place, sitting me up and down.
Could you take fluids down? Is that why they had to have the IV in?
No, I could stomach fluids, and I was sipping away, but after a little while they went to sit me up, and then my blood pressure dropped massively, and they're like, oh, no, okay, we got to get a bag through you. So, look, as I said off the top, unmitigated disaster. A few things, I say outside of my control, but like, do you know what? I could have done better. I could have double-checked those bolts. I could have put rubber bands on those bottles. But I suppose that's the perspective you have afterwards.
Yeah, and I think, and you know, like a coulda, shoulda, woulda moment for everything. But I think failure is important. I think it's very important. I think you have to. I think you have to fail in life, and you have to fail big, multiple times, because you just don't learn anything if you're continuously winning and being successful.
And that's why I'm not embarrassed to share the story, because I'm not embarrassed about the amount of work that I put in beforehand. I was not embarrassed about the condition. I'm not embarrassed about my ambitions or my goals, because I know I'm very capable of achieving that. But it went wrong. It went wrong, and not every story is successful. And then sometimes, you go to talk about things, or you go on podcasts, and all you ever hear is how well it went. But I think off the back of it, it's like, hey, moment for learning. Don't get me wrong. In the car on the way back to the house, Palm Beach, my wife was driving, I was in tears.
Yeah.
Like, that was an incredibly low, vulnerable moment for me, because I had the concept of this event on a pedestal in my mind for so long, and I was so tied up in the outcome. But that was the learning moment.
Yeah.
And it brought me back to, like, you talk about things that change your life beyond this book. The book that's changed my life the most, or just slapped me in the face right when I need it, was a book called Ego is the Enemy by Ryan Holiday. So many stories. We could do another whole chat about that. But one of the things he talks about there is the less attached to outcome we are, the better. So
enjoying the journey.
But it was in that moment, not in that moment, but in the days and the weeks and the months afterwards, where you sort of reflect on just how horrible and embarrassed you were about the fact that that happened. You come back to, well, why did I want to do this in the first place? Why was this journey or this event so significant for me? Yes, I've got an outcome attached to it and a goal that I want to work towards, but is that the reason I started? No. So for me, getting involved with triathlon's a little bit motivated or influenced by my upbringing, but ultimately I love the idea of the event in that it challenges me in ways that I know I need to be challenged. There is nowhere to hide in an Ironman if you haven't done the work. So the discipline of doing the training, the discipline of getting up early and finding a way to get it done, the arranging and the organising of your life to make space to do it, the discipline of diet, the discipline of eating, the patience in the training. Talk about long, slow, steady aerobic zone 2, taking no shortcuts in the build. All of the ways that this sport or this event tests me and challenges me is more important to me than the outcome. So off the back of it, it was the reflection on that, and then I've gone and got a coach and a whole bunch of other things. And conversation I had with my coach not long after we first sort of started working with each other, and he goes, you will nail this. You will nail this, and you will go fast the minute you stop caring about how fast you go. So remove yourself, detach from the outcome, commit to the process, and the results will take care of themselves.
Yeah, removing yourself from the ego of going fast.
Yeah, and it's balance.
Yeah.
It's the balance between having enough ego or enough ambition to be driven versus not succumbing to the ego.
Yeah, very similar story when I was running my 100K ultra. I came in about 14 hours, just over, and I was spewing. I was so spewing for weeks and weeks after, and even a little bit now, it still eats me away that the last 18Ks I practically walked it in just because my knees and my body was shot.
Yeah.
And it wasn't moving and I couldn't get it running, and it still eats me away now that I didn't get sub 12. But I just got to think back and, a bit of reflection, just like you've done. And it was my first 100K ultra.
Yeah.
My training wasn't great for it. My prep wasn't great for it. But a lot of stuff now that I'm doing, I think I'll definitely be able to run in under 12 now, just how strong my legs are and strong my knees are. And it took me that race to sit back and go, well, you're actually not that strong through your knees. You're not that strong through your lower body as well. You actually got quite weak legs.
Yep.
So what you need to do now is you need to go and you need to work it out. And I just had a guy on my podcast, good friend of mine, Shane. Me and him sat down and sort of worked out a program for myself to build my knee strength back up. Yep. And I just don't get sore on my knees anymore.
It's back
never
to the
do.
drawing board.
Yeah.
Just go back and build.
Yeah.
Go back away, turn the lights off, do the work.
Yeah, and it comes back to the point I had before is you have to fail.
Yep. If
you don't fail, you're never going to learn. And if you don't learn from your failures, then I'm sorry, I can't help you anymore.
Oh, yeah. If you're not at the edge of your comfort zone, that's where all of your growth happens. Again, the other analogy, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. You can think about it in the same way. But yeah, I suppose you asked me off the back of that, like, what did you do? What did you do differently? Or what are you now doing as a back of that? Yes, you do the introspection, you do the reflection. I moved past that to the point of almost gratitude. It's like, I'm actually glad that happened because there were lessons off the back of it. And now I have the opportunity to learn.
You're learning, yeah.
I'm grateful for that going as wrong as what it did because I'm now in a better place for it because I'm thinking about things differently. I'm applying myself in a slightly different way. And without that failure, you don't get that opportunity and you don't get the point. Well, you maybe do, but you're not forced to in the same way.
Yeah. Failure is so important, so important. And I think it's important for children as well. Children got to learn that through failure, you can work out where you went wrong. And okay, I might fail and I might lose a running race. Okay, so what do I need to win next time? What do I need to be better next time? And you can work out all this stuff from failure, and it can go across, not just sporting attributes or stuff like that, learning, relationships, anything.
All that sort of stuff. We're at that with my eldest now. He's 5. He's about to start school. And we're starting to do homework and learning games and things aren't coming easy to him. And I'm talking to him now, I was like, mate, first thing is it doesn't matter if you get it wrong. It's fine because you can see sometimes he doesn't want to try or he doesn't want to give an answer because he's worried about getting it wrong. So, mate, it's not tied up in that.
Get used to failure.
But it also don't place your self-worth in the outcome.
Yeah.
But then from there, just continue to encourage him every day. Do hard things. If it's still hard, keep doing it and keep doing it till it's easy. But that's one thing that I think is really, really cool. You talk about stuff being mirrored back to you. He'll say that back to me now. Dad, I'm going to do hard things today. I'm going to make sure I do hard things. I'm going to do new things and I'm going to do hard things.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of doing tough things daily.
Yep.
Whether it be I run 20K or I do the ice bath every morning, there's something in my daily routine that's tough to do.
It's another principle of Stoicism. It's the place yourself in situations where you can then question, is this the thing in which you feared?
Yeah, just let me read this paragraph, how that's going to reflect what we're talking about so well. What man actually needs is not a tensionless state, but rather the striving and struggling for a worthwhile goal. A freely chosen task.
Yeah, that's good, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the book's full of it, full of great stuff. And I look at just going back to your Ironman. I think you're too smart to fail again with it. I think you'll knock it out of the park, and if you don't concentrate on the time would take care of itself.
Trust the process.
Yeah.
Invest in the process.
Yeah, that's it. But yeah, like I said, I just think you're too smart to fail again. I think you're going to right your wrongs and through your failure, you'll see massive success, man. And I'm just going to, I'm really, really looking forward to having you back on to talk about the full completion of an Ironman.
We'll see how we go. December this year, Bustleton. That's the plan. Got a couple of races in the lead in. We'll get, as I said off the top, I feel like I'm getting fit again.
Yep. Yeah, so good stuff, man.
Thank you.
Thanks very much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Nah, all good. That was fun. Time has absolutely flown.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And for more information, head over to our Instagram at Two Worlds Collide Podcast. Take care.